Ozarks. This is my 5th year to serve as kindergarten teacher here. My own kids came here as students when the school opened 8 years ago, and we came to love classical education. I taught public school for 7 years, 3rd grade and kindergarten, and then I stayed home with my own kids for 11 years before I dove back into the classroom again. And I love it, and I love to teach kids to read, so I'm really excited to talk to you about phonics this morning. Today we are going to dive into more than just phonics. We will be exploring how all aspects of literacy and language arts complement phonics instruction as our learners develop into strong readers. So regardless of what core curriculum we use as a tool, we as classical Christian educators are all diligently teaching our students to read every day. We may be using various programs, but have one common goal: growing strong, powerful readers. Before we begin, why? Why do we bother? First of all, to glorify the Lord with words. We want our students to grow deeply in their faith, to share the truth of the gospel, to read the Bible, and to share His Word. Our number one goal in teaching them to read. Secondly, Clark and Jane, I don't know if you have read the Liberal Arts Tradition book yet. It's an excellent book. But they remind us in the Liberal Arts Tradition that students need to learn how to read, not simply to decode text, but to have the text speak to them. Text is an essential tool for forming intellectual virtue. Being mindful of how we educate students classically in the grammar stage, there are some things we can do in our classroom that will create a spark to fan the flame in our students' reading ability. And there are some roadblocks, instructional roadblocks, to be wary of. Wiley Blevins reminds us of that in this book, A Fresh Look at Phonics. It's an excellent source if you are wanting to beef up your phonics instruction in your class. And we'll use some of his examples today as we go through the morning. So a fire, it's really just a nice idea without a spark. It can be challenging to get a flame burning and requires some very specific steps to get a fire burning, if you've ever done it at home. Just as cracking the code of the English language does. Once the flame is lit, we add kindling to the fire. In teaching our students to read, our questions and concerns of method are framed within a larger context. If we are faithful to kindle habits in our students and seek to train them to order their affections well, while we complement our robust phonics instruction with beautiful literature, we will fan the flame and create students who burn brightly. In the early stages of lighting a fire, we're not quite ready to put on the full log yet, right? We begin with the kindling. We provide time, attention, and patience to the fire. Consequently, we must be wary of some of those instructional roadblocks that I mentioned. They can diminish the light inside of our learners. If we add the large logs to the fire too soon, we can snuff it out. But we cannot waste time once the flame is lit. We must encourage students to uncover and discover the wonder that God has given us in the code of the English language. There is joy found in cracking the code. Once we effectively teach our children to crack the code of phonics as classical Christian educators, a joy and love for reading emerges. It begins to flow and their fires burn brightly. I know you've seen that, your students, haven't you? So we're going to look through the lens of John Milton Gregory's 7 Laws of Teaching. I gave you a handout with those on there. That's a framework. He has an excellent book that is worth being read and reread if you haven't read it yet, 7 Laws of Teaching. And I like to reread it every once in a while just as a framework of what excellent teaching looks like. So you'll see me mention him a few times. A few components of strong phonics instruction. It's multisensory, it's sequential, it's explicit, it's incremental, cumulative, phonogram-based, and overall using Orton-Gillingham-based methodology. So let's look at systematic and explicit instruction. What do I mean by that? Systematic means sequential and incremental. And if we think about John Milton Gregory, he's talking about law number 4, the law of the lesson. So systematic, scope and sequence progresses from the simple to the complex, logical, well-planned sequence. It's incremental. Each lesson carefully builds upon the previous lesson. And then we exploit explicitly teach it, very clear and direct instruction. We talk about the shape of our mouths, articulation when teaching phonogram sounds, very specific with our students. I love this illustration. It kind of reminds me of, as a public educator, how I was taught students to read. This pile on the right, the analytic approach, is how I was taught students to read as a public school teacher. Just give them a bunch of words and text and let them figure it out. But that's not the way that we teach our students to read. Some students will learn that way, but the best way is to use a systematic and explicit approach, like the Legos over here. We're going to take one Lego at a time. We're going to build on that. We're going to follow a routine. Otherwise, we lose the foundation. We start with phonological awareness. It's incorporated daily during instructional time, or you can even do it during transitions, especially in kindergarten, first grade, into second grade. If you're a preschool teacher, this is fabulous to do with your students. Songs, games, rhymes, chants. These are things you can do almost with your eyes closed. It's ear training. Students are listening and not looking. We use a Haggerty curriculum at our school, and we call them word games, and we try to make them fun and engage the students. We see great success with that. Using nursery rhymes in your classroom, where they hear the rhythm and the rhyme. So good for our students, phonemic awareness. Then we get into daily blending and word work in the area of phonics. We want to keep our blending fun and keep it multisensory, so we're engaging every sense of our students at the same time, simultaneously. Getting to the visual, the auditory, the tactile, the kinesthetic. We want to keep it fun, keep it brief, and engage our students. And there's an instructional roadblock here. If we have lack of blending practice in the instructional cycle, then that can impede our students' learning. We want to make sure we're giving them opportunities to blend words, engaging all their senses simultaneously. So here are some ideas of things you can do in the classroom for phonics blending and word work. You can use word cards, you can use a blending board like the one that was on that previous slide, pocket chart games, making flashcards to match your decodable readers, large letter cards. We have cards and each student holds a card and we'll build words together. Student letter cards, magnetic boards. We have boards with letters on them and they can take the magnetic letters and build the words, or tiles. Phonogram cards, blending pockets. If you've never seen those, in the book Making Sense of Phonics, Beth, can't think of the first name, last name is Beth, who's the author of that. She has a excellent resource in there. You can just copy and make those blending pockets. Word sorts, word ladders. Your core curriculum workbook should have some blending practice in it. Supplemental workbooks like Explode the Code is excellent for that. Matching words, picture games, flip books, tactistoscopes, race reading. If you don't know what a tactistoscope is, it's kind of a word finder. It's a really fancy word for a word finder, where you would slide words through. We have those that go with the phonics curriculum. All excellent ways to just engage our students. So now we come to my favorite part of reading. It's the secret sauce, I call it. It's phonics dictation. I love to do it. It's hard for our students to do, but I call it the secret sauce because it's so important for our students. We're connecting sounds to spelling, developing orthography. Reading and spelling should go hand in glove, that tells us. Multisensory again, using all of our senses simultaneously. Visually, we're saying it, hearing it. Tactile, our mouth is touching. We're moving our mouth, we're feeling the sounds in our mouth. Kinesthetic, our hand is writing, all at the same time. We're engaging all those pathways in the brain at the same time. So good for our students. You can do phonogram dictation, word dictation, sentence dictation, depending on the level of your students in your classroom. You may do all of those at the same time. I wrote some ideas here of a sample routine. Kind of different programs have different ways of doing this. What we want to say, a phonogram or a word or a sentence together. You may finger spell it. Repeat the word. Have the students write the word. Students chorally blend it afterwards. I tell them to drive my marker and blend it together as they're giving me the sounds. We want to analyze it and use metacognition. So how many letters, how many sounds, how many syllables? Again, metacognition, we're thinking about our thinking, analyzing the word. And then give corrective feedback. Have the students correct their mistakes. Have them make it right. And then write it correctly so they can see it beautifully written. Make it fun. Make it a game. Give them points. There's so many fun things you can do because this is hard for students to do, but they can do it. So it's a little more fun if you make it a game. Make it brief. It shouldn't take a long time. Use whiteboards. In kindergarten, I usually use whiteboards. I have a few other methods I do, but our go-to is the whiteboard. Some programs use a journal or a notebook, worksheets and houses where you build the words. You can do it with shaving cream to make it more tactile. Rice tray, sand tray, and begin as early as kindergarten with this, and this can go all the way up. Fluency. It's comprised of both automaticity, which is our speed and accuracy. We want our students to be really quick with their sounds, and accurate with those sounds, and prosody. That's the way that they say it, the inflection of their voice. And we want to make sure that we're giving them controlled text, especially in the beginning, to exercise those muscles, to practice the skills that we're giving them. Wiley-Blevins tells us that 50% of our daily instruction should be controlled text reading. If you think about that, that's half of your reading instruction time, controlled text reading. Using decodable readers, or it could be sentences with controlled text, blended pages that you make, word lists, race reading, any way you can make it interesting or fun. And hence there's an instructional roadblock here. Lack of application in the instructional cycle is a common instructional failure. If we don't apply what we're teaching, then our students do not get an opportunity to learn it. They miss that opportunity. So we want to make sure we're applying and giving them the opportunity to learn. The next thing to remember is strong embedded review and practice. Law number 7, the law of review and application. The great late Kobe Bryant once said, "Why do you think I'm the best player in the world? Because I never get bored with the basics." Great athletes and great musicians become great by learning to overcome their boredom. We must instill a respect for foundational skills and make an effort to keep it interesting through strong embedded review and practice. Good teachers find a way to liven up what may seem like dull ground to some, because the review and the practice sometimes can seem not fun to students, especially the struggling students who need so much review and practice. We all know we have students who are going to get it almost right away. Then we have some who are going to need to practice it 20 times, 40 times. A really struggling learner might need it 80 times. But we need to find a way to make that happen for them so that they can gain that skill. Strong embedded review and practice again. We want to try and introduce our curriculum in the first 2/3 of the school year if it is to be mastered in that group, so that you allow time for them to master it. If we need time to practice and review, then we need to think about, are we giving them time to really learn what needs to be mastered in that school year? Questions to ask when you're looking at your curriculum. Do our decodable readers contain review? Or do I need to add that in there? Are we sending materials home with students to practice? Is our core curriculum allowing for enough practice and repetition? Is our core curriculum allowing for enough review? You can create your own formal and review repetition cycle to go with your curriculum if you don't have a strong enough one. Or maybe you just need it for certain students who really need that. And this can be another instructional roadblock. Lack of review and repetition is a common cause for instructional failure. I tell my parents that I want my students to overlearn, in a sense, their letters and their sounds in kindergarten. We're going to practice it, we're going to practice it, we'll practice it, so I can be faithful to the first grade teacher to have them ready for what they need. It takes a typical student about 4 to 6 weeks to master a skill. That's 4 to 6 weeks of regular, meaty, intense practice, Wiley-Blevins tells us. So ask yourself, is my goal mastery or exposure of this skill? If it's mastery, I need to make sure I'm allowing for enough time to practice that skill. And if it's just exposure, then we're just exposing it, and we know that in our cyclical curriculums, it's going to come back to that again. So think about what that looks like in your school. Be mindful that it takes struggling students significantly longer again to receive masteries. We need to be aware of our students who are not mastering those skills. A little bit more about strong embedded review and practice. Gregory in the 7 Laws of Teaching tells us that the repetitions of review are not made the same hour. They are spread over days and weeks, and hence they bring a new element into play. So each lesson should begin with review. Every day we're reviewing. We're reviewing daily, we're reviewing weekly, and we're doing long-term review. We're not teaching it and letting it go, oh, we're done with that. Keep reviewing, coming back to it, building on it. Some different ways that we can review in the classroom. Repeated readings, choral and individual readings, chants, phonogram chants, using phonogram common language. We don't want to spell words for our students. We want them to think on their own. We want to require them to think in phonograms, speak in phonograms, and guide them in spelling through phonograms. That's the tool. Then they need to use that tool and apply it in the classroom. You can use phonogram action rhymes. We have action rhymes that go with all of our phonograms. Phonics recitation, Sing, Spell, Read, and Write has some really great songs that help with this. Tactiscopes again. A binder of resources for home practice. Whatever we're teaching, send it home to the parents so that they can be reviewing and supporting what you're doing in the classroom at home. We're doing word work. Once again, dictation is an excellent way to review. The use of pen and pencil in review work ought to by no means be forgotten. Next to the eye, the hand is the born teacher of the mind. And no reviews are more effective than those which the hand helps. Gregory tells us in the 7 Laws of Teaching, make sure we're engaging those senses again. We want to make sure we have a formal review and repetition cycle. Pacing is so important in the classroom. Our lessons should be quick. We want to review drills and keep them staccato. They go fast. Make them fast. Make them go. Keep the kids on their toes. Lessons are to be short and power-packed. Lessons should be rich and direct. We don't want to give fluff and busy work. I feel like this day and age, with teachers pay teachers and all that is out there, there is so much fluff that we can add to our lessons, and it looks really fun. But we always want to think, is this really the best thing that is going to help my student to gain this skill? So just thinking that through, be planned, prepared, and organized to keep your classroom flow moving. Whatever it is that helps you. I use sticky notes a lot. If you come to my classroom, you'll see sticky notes all over. These are things I want to make sure I hit today. Keep your teaching tools at your fingertips. You don't want to be walking around the room looking for what you need in the middle of class because you've lost your students. Make your copies ahead of time so that you don't find yourself in a bind at the last minute. Another thing that can really help is instructional routines. Anita Archer does a lot of excellent teaching on instructional routines and how they can help set your classroom up for success. Read, spell, write. Those are just things that your students know. When you say read, spell, write, they know what to do. Or say, spell, say. Read it, build it, write it. Using finger spelling or structural analysis. You don't have to take time every day to say, okay, students, now we're going to do this. You can just say, read, spell, write. Your students know exactly what to do. You're not taking time explaining things every single day. Pacing is so important. One of the most wonderful things we can do as teachers is to use a gradual release model when we're teaching. It's an excellent model for proper pacing. I do it, we do it, you do it, together, and then alone. I'm sure you're doing this in your classroom. Whoever does the thinking does the learning. So we want to require students to do the heavy lifting of learning and thinking on their own. Teachers are by nature nurturers. We must be wise to make students do the hard work of thinking and learning. We want to set it up for them, get their gears working, prepare them that it will be hard, but they can do it. So this can be an instructional roadblock for us. If we get stuck on the I do it stage, which sometimes as nurturing teachers we do, we just want to help them. If we only ever tell them the programs and don't make them apply those skills, then we've got stuck on the I do it stage. We want to make sure they're applying what they're learning in their classroom. Make them do it, make that proper pacing happen. Transitions, we want to use our time wisely in our classroom. Add a phonics song or chant into a transition to practice. Add phonemic awareness games into your transitions when you're at restroom break or anywhere you're going. Add nursery rhymes into those transitions. Be prepared for activities. Don't waste time passing items out or losing your valuable instruction time. Be planned, prepared, and organized. Have systems and jobs in your classroom. You know, this is the student who passes out the papers today. This is the student who's going to tap the other kids to get them to their seats, and you're moving along teaching students. You have your students doing those jobs so that you don't have to be doing that. Our classroom should flow like a well-oiled machine. We want to be wise stewards of our time. Our time is a gift from God to be used for His glory. He gave us this day, so we want to steward it well and honor Him with that time. We want to continually be assessing our students, but not be assessment-driven, which is tricky. We want to formally and informally assess our students, listening to them read, using cumulative assessments so that we're catching up, making sure that they're remembering things that we learned weeks ago, and then expect mastery. We want to communicate with parents if mastery is not met. Because in the classroom setting, if you're a classroom teacher, sometimes you need to move on, and your students may not be ready to move on. So you need to partner with your parents really well, so we know our students, and we know, you know what, this class is ready to move on, but this student is not ready to move on. So then that's a conversation with parents that we need to have. That they're going to get a little extra practice right here to succeed. Without being assessment-driven, but we want to have the intent of truly knowing our students. Another way we can do that is to partner with parents very well. We want to communicate. We are acting in loco parentis. Keep the communication door open, wide open with your parents. This is how we love our families well. We expect our parents to partner. Call them, text them, email them. I get the privilege of putting my own students in their cars every day, so I get to talk to almost every parent every single day, whether they like it or not. We should never know anything about a student that a parent does not know. We want to communicate everything and build trust with parents. They won't question us as much if they trust us. Let them know we're on the same team. We're all trying to help Johnny learn. We are on Johnny's team together. They're merely standing in their place during school hours. And they're trusting us that as professionals, that we're going to communicate with them. They're not teachers often. They don't know what to do. So when they see their students struggling, or we see their students struggling, and we say, you need to help them with this, we need to be specific with them. Here's a tool that you can use with your child, because they may not know what to do. Use common language between grade levels, so we don't confuse our parents. You know, if we call them phonograms in one grade and something else in another grade, like, what are you talking about? Let's make sure we are on the same page between our grade levels. Student achievement has shown to increase when parents are more involved, so let's involve them. Let's let them know that they are important to us. We want to partner with parents by encouraging reading at home. So ample evidence demonstrates that one of the major differences between good readers and poor readers is the amount of time they spend reading. The difference partially stems from reading in school, but better readers choose to read more outside school as well. Remember the 20 minutes a night we've all encouraged. We want our students to be reading. You can see this chart shows us that it makes a difference when our students read at home. Expect and encourage it. Controlled text, non-controlled text, repeated readings, continuous readings. It's both foundational and critical that students not only read at school, but also at home. Exposure to excellent literature and poetry to boost reading fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. We want to move from good books to the great books. I love this quote in liberal arts tradition. I'm going to read it to you. You may have heard Dr. Dr. Clark referred to John Sr. in the last few days, and this is actually a quote from John Sr. Sr. explains that if we are to cultivate capable readers of the great books, we must start with the good books. The seeds, the great books, are good, but the cultural soil has been depleted. The seminal ideas of Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, St. Thomas only properly grow in an imaginative ground saturated with fables, fairy tales, stories, rhymes, adventures which have developed into the 1,000 books of Grimm, Anderson, Stevenson, Dickens, Scott, Dumas, and the rest. Western tradition, taking all that was best from the Greco-Roman world into herself, has given us the 1,000 great books as a preparation for the great ones, and for the studies in the arts and sciences, without which such studies are inhumane, he says. In fact, if you have this book, there is a list in the back of the 1,000 good books. If you Google that, you can find that online. 1,000 good books that he recommends. And there's other places you can go to get book lists like that. ClassicalReader.com, Honey for a Child's Heart by Gladys Hunt, ReadAloudRevival.com has excellent resources, the Read Aloud Handbook. So many places we can look to get excellent literature for our students. So this is a diagram of the reading rope. I don't know how many of you have seen this before. Scarborough developed this reading rope, and you can see, if you compare language comprehension with word recognition, as important as phonics is, down at the bottom, word recognition, it's even more important that our students have language comprehension that is gained from reading and being read to. So phonics is one very vital component of robust reading, but language comprehension largely comes from birth, from in utero, when parents are reading to students and they're talking to students. So we need to be reading to our students and talking to our students and encouraging our parents to do that. Our role as the teacher is very important. If we remember that our ultimate goal is cultivating loves and not mastering techniques, as I just talked to you about a lot of techniques, education is about formation, not so much information. So we ask ourselves, this quote from Jenny Rollins, who writes on the subject, how do we use our academic practices to shape our students' affections? And what are the ingredients of those practices that most powerfully shape students' hearts? That's a great question. Shaping the character of our students, pointing students to Christ. Our students are image bearers. So it's not necessarily what I do or even how I do it, but what I love. And do they see that in me as a teacher? I'm training their affections, cultivating virtue, teaching students to love truth, goodness, and beauty, even while I'm teaching them phonics and reading. Tuning students' hearts. What good is a child with head knowledge, but no joy or love for that very thing? We want them to love reading. The teacher sets the tone for the class, and the teacher fosters that character formation in the class. We as the teacher are the curriculum, and we know our students well. So we teach them. Why do we do this? Right? We teach them. What are we doing this for in the classroom? We're doing it for the Lord. We have an audience of one. We want our students to know that. We want to set them up to succeed in the classroom, equipping students to work hard. It's a character-building process. It's preventative correction. Informative discipline. We prevent things from going wrong in the future, coupled with corrective discipline, restoring fellowship between the student and other individuals. So in doing that, we provide affective support. Back to the law of the learner. So how do we do this in the classroom? Through liturgy and habit-shaping practices that form the heart, even as we're teaching phonics and reading. We develop virtue and character through kindling healthy habits and holding our expectations high while we're teaching, through methods, routines, and pedagogies. So habits of the mind. How do I build attentiveness in my students while I'm teaching? We ask them, how do we listen? With our eyes, ears, and heart. We attend to each word as we're reading. We attend to each letter as we're reading. We don't allow guessing. We require them to be attentive in their reading and their learning in our classroom. How do we build perseverance and fortitude? We tell them we're strong and courageous, just like we've been learning about Joshua. Whoever does the thinking does the learning, and encourage grit. We encourage habits of the body, like diligence in their work. We tell them, this is going to be hard. We do hard things well, right? Colossians 3:23, our audience of one, we do hard things well for the Lord. We teach them to love work and esteem it highly by requiring them to be careful in their work, requiring them to be neat in their work. We require proper hand position. We say, ready to write, posture, paper, pencil grip. We require them to have those beautiful habits in the classroom. We're training them in discipline, exercising the skill, training industry, the energetic, devoted activity in the classroom, industrious, constancy, consistency in their work. We're growing these habits, even in the classroom. Habits of the heart. We require a right attitude as they're learning. Cheerfulness. A cheerful heart is good medicine. Enthusiasm is contagious. When we have it, they catch it from us. Good teachers find ways to liven things up and encourage these things and ignite a love for learning. We encourage those habits of the soul, like respect and reverence in our classroom. And we also provide cognitive support for our students. We take brain breaks. Let their brains take a break and make them fun and meaningful. Make learning fun. Teacher and student attitude is critical. An attitude that is light and fun. But once again, we don't want to supplement fluff into our day. Make it meaningful, use our time wisely. We can do phonogram games, races, speed points, songs, chants, transitions. Do we know our phonograms? Instead of pointing, we can do fun ninja readers, use a magic finger, and fun different little things that we do. Encourage play in the classroom. As a teacher, we need to know phonics and phonograms, rules. We must know the science of how children learn to read and the art of how we foster that development. We want to provide rigor but not harshness, loving way. Be mindful that we actually are rebuilding the ruins. So be discerning. When reading curriculum and phonics resources are created for our modern culture, we consider our goals of student formation and instruction through the lens of the Christian worldview in light of the principles of classic pedagogy. There's a lot out there that is not best for us. In doing this, we consider what's called the Matthew effect in reading. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Matthew effect before. Some of you have heard of this. So, the Matthew effect, Keith Stanovich writes about this. It comes from the book of Matthew. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. So basically, it says that the student who loves to read, he enjoys reading, he gets lots and lots of practice, he develops automaticity, reading becomes pleasant, excellent vocabulary growth, he has a great attitude, he becomes a great reader, and he rises. On the contrary to that, we have the student who there's no enjoyment in reading. He doesn't get enough practice, he doesn't develop automaticity, reading becomes unpleasant, he gets on this downward spiral as he goes. And then our students struggle. It causes a gap in their growth. And we can see here the good readers improve at a faster pace and the poor readers improve at a slower pace. Malcolm Gladwell writes about this in his book, Outliers. He writes, the tallest oak in the forest is the tallest not just because it grew from the hardiest acorn. It's the tallest also because no other trees blocked its sunlight. The soil around it was deep and rich. No rabbit chewed through its bark as a sapling, and no lumberjack cut it down before it matured. We all know that successful people come from hardy seeds, but do we know enough about the sunlight that warmed them? The soil in which they put down their roots, and the rabbits and lumberjacks who were lucky enough to avoid. Right? So we're the ones who are providing the sunlight and the rich soil for those students who may struggle if we don't intervene and help them. They need to foster and learn that love of reading that they can get from us and the way that we teach. So what is our calling as classical Christian educators in the grammar phase? We want this generation to love God and to love God's Word. As strong readers, our students can more deeply study and learn about God through His Word. Now, I've talked about a lot, I've thrown a lot at you, lots of methodology and things we can do in our classroom, and we can be like Martha, anxious and troubled about many things, or we can be like Mary and take it to the Lord and sit at his feet and rest in him and trust him with our students and our classrooms. He will give us insight into each student and how to reach each one. Luke reminds us. I have a little quote for you that Jessica's passing out that I love, and it's a reminder to keep cultivating the flame. Just an inspirational quote from Elizabeth Elliot. It says, "This job has been given to me to do. Therefore, it is a gift. Therefore, it is a privilege. Therefore, it is an offering I may make to God. Therefore, it is to be done gladly. It is to be done for him, here, not somewhere else. I may learn God's way in this job, not in some other. God looks for faithfulness." I hope that quote will encourage you as much as it does to me. I know Elizabeth Elliot actually wrote that about motherhood, but I think it very much applies to us as teachers. Before I open up for questions, I'd love to close us in prayer. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning, God. We thank you for your faithfulness and your love, God. Thank you for each of these sweet image bearers that are in our classrooms, Lord. Thank you for the gift of being classical Christian educators. You are a good God who gives good gifts, Lord. I pray that you would help us to be faithful each day to carry out what you have called us to do. And we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Does anybody have questions for me before we move on?
I was just curious, do you ever do any training for the new parents about how you want them to read English? I just had to pray and decided to see just some kind of differences in what you guys told me, how they read and that kind of thing. I just was curious if you did anything like that.
Yes, we do require our students, I should say require, we incentivize our parents to be reading with our students and reward them in different ways and different grades. I have a bubblegum reward, and our first grade teacher does end of the month celebrations, our second grade teacher does end of the month celebrations. As far as like a formal training.
Yes, I thought it's really required to do but it's more than how they do it.
I love that.
Some parents are just kind of kids sitting here, and mom's still here, and it's not really suited to how they're reading. Maybe because, it's kind of rushing through and there are pause periods of information happening. I just was curious if it's anything kind of.
We have not formally. That's a great thing to think about. We have not formally trained our parents in how to do that, but that is a really great idea to do, to train them and teach them. That's an excellent way to partner, because they may not know exactly. We do guide them towards certain places, like some of those references that I gave you, where to find great books, or the good books, I guess, as they refer to them, for students to read. But yeah, that's an excellent way to partner. Yes. For intervention plans, we'll have certain things that we require them to do, but as a whole, just for the general class, that's a great idea to train our parents, because they may not know. They're not educators often. Some of them are. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, have you found that incentives for reading, like getting your parents to put their kids to work really well? Because I know I've got 2 or 3 in my class, but no matter what the reward is, there's always 2 or 3 that don't get it because they did not do required reading with their parents. And do you find that your system keeps everybody reading?
We have had that, especially in the beginning of the year. Usually a little bit of peer pressure helps with that when they miss out on the celebration. I've had years where I have a class Facebook page and I'll post pictures of the students who have earned that reward, and then the parents see, oh, my child didn't earn that reward because I didn't do that. We've had that before. Usually peer pressure helps a little bit with that. But yes, we do sometimes have parents who just have not chosen to do it. And it's so important. Yes?
I teach fifth grade, and I'm curious what you would say would be ways to help students who don't have a diagnosis. So these aren't kids that have a specific reading disability or learning difference, but are just low readers.
Mm-hmm.
What are your recommendations to help them? You know, I'm past the teaching phonics. We do go over some, but in fifth grade, we don't have time allotted to teach students to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are your recommendations in those situations?
Yeah. We have some students who've moved up through the ranks who struggle in reading as well. I think that's when we really partner heavily with parents, asking them to intervene in those situations. We have some volunteers who will do the Barton reading program for some of our students. We have some other volunteers in the school who will push into those older grade classrooms and help with students. The last few years we've started doing the Dibbles, using a Dibbles tool with our students, and that is helping to identify those things a little bit younger so we don't get that far, and that's helped us a little bit. Anybody else? Yes.
Yes, where is the, why can't I skip my 20 minutes of reading tonight? Where is that, like I can copy it for parents?
Yes, so it is, you probably can't read it, of course. It is from the MA Rooney Foundation.
Say it again.
MA, capital M-A, Rooney, R-O-O-N-E-Y Foundation. They have published an Orton Gillingham curriculum that's free online and printable, and that is where I found that resource.
Okay, thank you. And also, race reading. What do you exactly mean by race reading?
Great question. We do different ways of doing this. We use the Victory Drill resource. So that's a book that is just lots of words. And Victory Drill, Memoriam Press also has a similar type book to that, where it's just a list of words. It's called classical. She's not here right now. Classical phonics, classical reading. I have race reading pages that, and I can send them to you. I found them online actually, that I send home with my students. And they're CBC words or blends, and they just kind of race through to develop that authenticity. So touch base with me and I'll give that to you. Any other questions? Yes.
You have a quote from the tradition.
Oh,
What page were you on for that quote?
oh, the liberal arts tradition. Yes, it is page 297. And then the same quote is also in the back on page 322 with the 1,000 Good Books list. Now this is the ACCS version of the book, so it may be different from the other version. Okay.
What
Yes.
is the title of that again?
This is the liberal arts tradition, and it's written by Dr. Clark, who is our plenary speaker here. Excellent resource. There's actually a lot in here about literature and reading. This is a great tool. Okay, if you don't have any questions for me, I have questions for you. I have some discussion questions that you can discuss within your tables. And I think Jessica's going to pass those out for you that you can glean from each other, because I know that you have a lot to share with each other.